Looks like we're live. Okay. Well, hello there. Welcome to TBRCon. My name is ML Spencer, and we've got a wonderful, wonderful chat today about characterization in fiction. And I have some absolutely fantastic authors with me here today, ready to discuss it. And I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and I'll go last. I'm just going to take you guys in order of my screen. First, go ahead, RJ Barker. Tell us about yourself, please.
Oh, hello. I'm RJ Barker. I write kind of epic fantasy. That's what I've got to say. It's the rules. And I've done 2 trilogies. I've just released my 6th book, which is this one that is handily by me. The Bone Ship's Wake. That's from the Tide Child Books, and it won the British Fantasy Society Robert Holdstock Award. If I don't say that, my editor gets so cross with me. I get emails going, "You didn't mention the word." My other one is the Wounded Kingdom books, and I've got the beautiful Italian cover of that here because it is the most goth thing. I just love it.
Ooh.
It is, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Anyone easily bought it, but anyway, and that's me, and I'm really glad to be here, and I'll try to stay on topic. It's not going to happen.
Excellent. Thank you, RJ. Okay, go Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Wragg. I am the author of slightly less epic fantasy. I wrote The Black Hawks and I wrote The Righteous, which came out in June last year. And I think they're both pretty good and you should buy them.
Thank you very much. Mike Chen.
Hi, I'm Mike Chen. I write much less epic science fiction. I write character-driven science fiction, which is very appropriate for this. I actually just had a release a few days ago, a book called Light Years from Home, and I have an upcoming Star Wars book called Brotherhood in May.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. All right, Mike Carey.
Hi there, I'm Mike Carey, or sometimes MR Carey, occasionally Adam Blake. I write sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superhero comics, whatever I can dredge up, really. Probably best known for Go With All the Gifts, a zombie novel and a movie, and maybe for Lucifer at DC Vertigo.
Yeah. That's really cool. Thank you, Mike. And Sammy.
Hi, I'm Sammy. I'm a writer from England. My book Anna was released by Rebellion last year. It's character-driven dystopian fiction, very feminist themes. I also write fantasy, and I co-own Grimble Books, which is the British Fantasy Award-winning sci-fi publisher.
Oh, very cool. And I'm ML Spencer. You can call me Melinda. That's my name. And I wrote Dragon Mage, which is up there behind me. It won Reader's Favorite Award last year. And I also wrote the Rune War Saga behind me. And it's very epic fantasy. I used to write more darker stuff, but now it's just pretty much standard epic. So that's me. All right, so I figured we would just start the talk today just by talking about characterization in general. And I just thought maybe a definition would be a great place to start. So again, I'm kind of going in order. What is characterization, at least to you? Take it away, RJ.
It's making people appear real to the reader, even though that's actually you can't make a real person in a book, but it's creating a skeleton that has enough in it that the reader can hang their own. For me, this is what I'm trying to do when I do it. That the reader can hang their own experiences on and create someone that to them appears that they can go, oh yeah, I understand why they're doing that, and that speaks to me, and then they're invested in it, and they're there, and then you take that and hopefully use it to lead your reader on a journey. I hate that word, journey. But that's what characterization is to me. And congratulations on your book release, Mike. I didn't know it was that soon, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations, Mike. I saw it on Amazon. I was kind of eyeballing it. Cool. Okay, Dave, what is characterization to you?
Yeah, obviously RJ's just nicked the best answer by talking about skeletons immediately.
Yes.
I like to think of it as a sort of an elegant form of lying, because you can, obviously, as RJ said, you can't create real people, but you can create a facsimile of one. So characterization is about trying to impart as much of a sense of who you want this person to seem to your reader without spending an absolute age to do it, because you could just sit there and write down, they felt this, they thought this, and then you could put in 16 pages of background history, etc., and that would technically count as characterization. And by the end of it, maybe the reader would have a decent idea of the kind of person that you were intending this character to be. But you might also be able to do it in a line of dialogue and a nice piece of description. So that's where I'd be aiming for.
Excellent. And Mike, Chen, characterization.
First off, I'll apologize for my lighting. I have 4 lights like blasting on me, and for some reason it looks like
there are 4 lights.
Yes. I think characterization is the difference between a character being a plot point and someone that the reader empathizes with, because I always see like the tipping point for me when I'm watching something, when I'm reading something, is the plot driving the character, or is the character's choices and quirks and internal history, is that driving the plot? And I always, good characterization is always the latter.
That's an excellent point. Thank you.
Also, I'm going to be fiddling with my lighting. So if my face is like, that's what's happening.
Okay,
sorry,
Mike,
Carey. It's goth leaking out of my picture. And it's Dave's darker and yours darker. It's going to get you, Mike and Sammy too.
My next book is a vampire book, so it's appropriate.
Yes, it is.
So I would agree with everything that's been said already. I guess the only thing I'd add to that is characterization is creating points of attachment between the reader and the story. Someone said news and history is events. It's things happening. Stories are things happening to people. The people are what make the difference for us. They're the ways that we project ourselves as readers into the fictional world. So the essence of characterization is doing that, I think.
Excellent. And Sammy?
It's always hard going last when you've had great answers before that. But echoing what everyone said, it is taking that facsimile, that skeleton, it's building on it. Personally, I build on it with experiences. It's not giving the reader everything about that character. It's giving them snippets, letting them fill in the gaps, letting their own experiences, their own thoughts, their own processes connect with that character. And I think some of the best characters that you can have are ones that one reader will take something away from them and another reader will take something else, because they're able to project their own experiences onto them and sort of understand their motivations. And those characters where you have, why the hell did they act this way? I wouldn't do that. Or then you have somebody else going, oh my God, I can completely empathize with what's going on here. So I think taking all your experience and putting it into your character, but not sitting there and like the guys have said, writing out reams and reams and reams of history, but just subtly weaving it through the thread of the story makes a good characterization.
And we've got a comment on the side. Star Wars vampires. Mike, can you confirm?
Sorry, my Star Wars is my next book in May, but then my next book as a standalone is about vampires. So there's unfortunately no crossover between vampires and Star Wars. Or
yes,
that would be cool though.
Yeah.
Okay, what I was thinking we can do is each of us kind of take like one of our favorite characters and just kind of talk about them and talk about like what makes that character an interesting character. Okay, so RJ, take that away.
Oh God! I wasn't expecting homework.
I'm so glad you're going first.
Yeah. I'm tempted to go for Harry Bosch from Michael Connelly's books. No, actually, I'm not. I'm going to go for another crime novel, Dave Robichaud from James Lee Burke's books. Who what makes him interesting is he's a man with a huge propensity for violence, who knows it's wrong and believes it's wrong entirely, and the entire book is sort of this. Each of his books is this pressure cooker of this deeply human man. You see the world through his eyes. You see terrible people and how he always wants to make their world better. You absolutely empathise with him. but you know it's going to a bad place.
Okay.
And it's done so well that you feel his disappointment in himself when it goes there. And can I do two? Can I just quickly touch on Matthew Shardlake from C.J. Sampson's books, who is I should have gone to first, but I'm not that quick. Who is just the most human and wonderful man in sort of the most awful position, being crushed by these really powerful things. And all his books are just a masterclass in empathy for this person and how he sees a deeply unfair world and can do nothing about it and is really just trying to survive. And I think humanity in a character is what touches me. That they feel for other people. I'm not really so interested if I like it. That's what I like in a character.
What about your own characters, RJ? Who's your favorite character that you've constructed?
That answering it's deeply spoilery for the Wounded Kingdom trilogy.
Okay.
I like characters that change, that start off as something and realize. And there's a character in the Wounded Kingdom trilogy who people that have read it will know exactly who it is, who changes a massive amount. And people hate him in the first book, and by the third book, he's the favorite character of a lot of people.
Okay.
And I like that. And there's a character I do with it. In the Bone Ships, my favorite character is probably a thing called the Ghalane, which is like an avian wizard that speaks in very broken English. It's a slave species basically, but it's been freed, and it is righteously angry with that. It's just as a writer, it's joyous to write this character that is angry with everybody and it's right about it, and it's also quite funny, and I like it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Awesome.
I'll change my mind in 5 minutes. I'll be like, me, please, miss.
That's okay. We can come back to you. All right, Dave, Wragg, go ahead.
Yeah. My favorite character, obviously, Jack Reacher. No, I'm kidding. In terms of the books I haven't written, which is most of them, it's probably Maya from Catherine Anderson's Goblin Emperor. Because, again, just to crib off RJ's answer, it's someone who is inherently extremely empathetic, humanistic, and sticks to their principles, despite everything that's against them, and, you know, without spoiling it, sort of wins out at the end of the day based on being nice, which I think is quite refreshing. In terms of the stuff I've written, it's hard to pick favorites, because my books are about essentially a gang of incredibly useless mercenaries. They don't see it that way. They think that they are just hard done by. But with a critical eye, you can probably say that some of their misfortunes may or may not be connected to their decisions and actions, which is an incredibly unfair thing to say about anyone. In terms of pure characterization, my favorite character is Lemon of the ones I've written, because there isn't so much a character arc, but there is a getting to know them over the course of the books. And it's someone who starts out as this sort of slightly strange creature that the main character encounters, who is very sweary and, you know, extremely in your face, and says things that nobody should say to anyone they've just met. And by the end of it, it's the same character, but, you know, as a friend rather than as a hostile stranger. And, you know, the character doesn't particularly change during that time, but, you know, I think in terms of like achieving the goal of characterization, you will get to know Lemon within 2 pages, and then you will see the depths of Lemon over the course of the next 800, give or take.
Very good. And Mike, Chen.
So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to combine those answers together, because I'm going to talk about Anakin Skywalker, who I get to write for Star Wars Brotherhood. I think for people who have not seen the Clone Wars series, that their big swatches of Anakin Skywalker is, you know, this character that doesn't get a lot of time for character development between episodes 2 and 3, because there's so much other stuff happening. And one of the things that I'm a huge Clone Wars fan. I think it's like the perfect piece of Star Wars, all 7 seasons of it. I get to extrapolate a bridge between Attack of the Clones and where we see Anakin at the beginning of the Clone Wars, the movie that came out. So my goal with characterization with him is to really look at what is he missing as a person, and what is driving him, and lines that like we kind of we gently mock like we do with all Star Wars lines about like Tashi Station for power converters or whatever. With Anakin, it's the I don't like sand line, and I really like that is a I leaned into that. Like it's in several beats of my book because says so much about who he is, how he grew up. He grew up as enslaved on a desert planet where sand was everywhere. His existence was harsh, and he's comparing it to being with Padme, who grew up like on the most beautiful planet of all time in Naboo. So like little things like that where you can take something that seems quirky or hokey or something, and then drilling down about like what is their real world perspective with it. And with Anakin, it's his drive is he was separated from his mother at a critical age. He lost his surrogate father basically as soon as he met him. He is given basically to his like an older brother figure who does not know what to do with him. His support system is the Jedi Order, that like they all say like you're the chosen one, but you're also too old to be trained and you shouldn't have feelings. And he's longing for for this woman that he met, that like he just dreams about, because like she represents like escape to him in so many ways. And then you have Palpatine, who is constantly trying to like push him towards some things but also taking things away from him. And so that was really fascinating to play with as a character, like knowing like the external machinations of what's like happening at the beginning of the Clone Wars and why Palpatine is doing all this, and then experiencing it from Anakin's point of view, about like trying to get stability and control and understand his feelings while things are being slowly like the seeds are being planted to like take away things from him. So yeah, um it was a blast to write. So I'll say like he's one of my favorite characters, particularly the way he's presented in the Clone Wars, and getting to write him, he can slide into that spot for me too.
Wow, and you just actually made me empathetic toward a character I have always despised.
He's really, really fascinating. I always viewed him as like, the things that he needs in his life are, he needs a sense of family, and that's been destroyed. He needs a sense of stability, and that's been destroyed. He wants to understand himself, and the Jedi won't let him do that. And he can't even be honest with his wife because he can't see his wife all the time. He can't be honest with his best friend / mentor because he's not supposed to be married. And then you have Palpatine, who is like, oh, I need your power, but you have these support systems. So I'm going to send you on assignments and create doubt and do all these things to push you away from them. And it's a classic abuser, thing. And so finally, when he's finally pushed and he has to make a choice in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine's like, hey, I am your cool uncle who has always been there and talked to you and listened to you. Do you trust me, or do you trust the people who are saying, you can't have a wife, you can't have friends, you can't have feelings? Who are you going to trust? So I think like bridging that arc between what we see when he talks about sand in Attack of the Clones, and where he's led to like this pressure point of he's got to choose between the person who's been there and the people who have not been there for him. I think it's really fascinating, and the Clone Wars series does an excellent job of leaning into that.
That's
I could
really
talk
awesome.
about Anakin Skywalker forever.
Well, you may have an opportunity in the next like hour and 15 minutes. All right, Mike Carey, your turn.
Well, I wanted to say Kara, the protagonist of Micaiah Johnson's The Space Between Worlds, but because she really is a stunning, multifaceted character and incredibly vividly drawn. But it's impossible to discuss her without giving away major spoilers for her arc. So I'm going to go for Severian, the protagonist of Gene Wolfe's Torturer Quartet. And one of the things I love about him is that he is, in some ways, the most unsympathetic character you could possibly imagine. You know, he's somebody who is trained as a torturer. He's had every shred of empathy removed from him. He's expert in causing people pain. When he's kicked out of the Torturers Guild, he gets a job as a traveling torturer and executioner because it's the only thing he knows. And he is completely emotionally unavailable. He's profoundly scarred by these experiences, but so scarred that he doesn't recognize that he's scarred. And he is the point of view character for 4 books, in the course of which he goes from being an outcast and an exile from his guild to basically being in control of the entire civilized world, being the ruler of Earth, and the only chance that Earth has for escaping from its terminal decline and becoming a livable, habitable world again. And I think he's an amazing point of view. I think in reading those books, you get to inhabit his perspective, his worldview in a way that is startling and moving and endlessly surprising.
Very cool. Yes.
Go ahead. In terms of my own characters, I'd probably go for Coley, the main protagonist of the Coley trilogy, the Rampart trilogy, the 3 books that I had out in the last few years. And again, what I love about Coley is just he's a terrible protagonist. He's completely helpless. He lives in a world where pretty much every living thing is inimical to humans and tries to kill and eat humans. And Coley can't survive for a second in that world without the intervention of other people. But what he does have is he is the opposite of Severian. He's totally empathetic. He's managed to keep his conscience in a world where most other people are compromised. And he just always tries to do the right thing. He's a very sweet, very well-intentioned character, surrounded by people who are more ruthless, more capable, more resourceful, better adapted to survive in his world.
Excellent. That sounds so fascinating. Okay, Sammy, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Well, I don't know if you've been noticing, but I've been doing a little side-eye scroll thinking, oh my God, I've been put on the spot. Who's my favourite character? Through all the books I've read recently. I find that question really, for me, it's almost impossible to answer because I love different characters for different reasons. There is no one character. This is such a washout answer, I know. But I love so many different characters for so many different reasons. I love your stereotypical feminist, strong character who overcomes everything. I love the characters that RJ and Mike are talking about that are ruthless and cruel, but actually you get beneath the layers and you understand the history and the psyche behind it, and you can almost empathize with them. Taking the twist on it, if I was to look at not just characters but say couplings, not necessarily romantic ones, but pairs, I have 2, which are Phaedra and Jocelyn from Cushiel's Darts, Jacqueline Carey's novel, which is my all-time favourite because of the power play between the 2 parties. We've got one who's a very stoic, strong stereotype of a man, and then we've got the beautiful courtesan who actually is the backbone and strength of that relationship. But they pair quite well on one another, and they play to each other's strengths. And then completely on the other end of the scale, which is embarrassing, but I love Dex and Emma from David Nichols' One Day, because I find them very relatable characters. They're flawed. They shout, they scream, they don't tell each other how they're truly feeling. They lie, they manipulate. They're human beings that we can relate to. So I don't have a particular favourite character from a novel, but there are things, or show even, but there are things that I absolutely adore about these characters that would probably have them up there as being some of my favourites. And I know that's a washout answer, but I can't just pick one character who I adore. I really can't. And from my own book as well, the youngest character in there is a little boy called Philip, who, this is a dystopian world, and it's a very cruel world where right his might. There's abuse, there's all sorts of power in place, and he's found alone, and he's very closed off, and he doesn't trust anyone. He's traumatized, and he starts to open up during the book to a particular character, and it was incredibly fun writing his behaviors and sort of taking a little bit of my professional background and putting it into the novel, and writing him as I feel he would be. And he's a character that I'm particularly proud of, because we go from a small mouse of a boy to somebody who's able to open up into love. And I think certainly he's a few of my readers' favourites as well.
That's really awesome. Oh my gosh. I've been thinking while you guys are talking, what my favorite character is, and I realized that I like anti-heroes, I guess. Probably one of my favorite characters of all time was Gerald Terrence, from C.S. Friedman's Coldfire trilogy, because he's such an evil, awful person who'd murdered his entire family, and yet we have to depend upon him. And he turns out to be like not a half bad guy in a lot of ways, even though he's a cold-blooded murderer. And then there's Thomas Covenant that comes to mind too. One of the most disgusting characters in all of fiction, who happens to be our hero. And, he should be an empathetic character. He has leprosy. Nobody likes him. He's an outcast. But at the same time, he's just the most completely selfish, like debasing human being you've ever met. And so, but I still find him a very fascinating character. Okay, next up on my line of question. How do you go about introducing a character to your readers in a way that humanizes them and allows the reader to make a connection, and at the same time kind of just goes directly to the heart of who that character is? RJ.
You see, this is sort of thing that I'm quite bad at answering, because it's good if you're kind of writer that sits and plans things out and thinks, well, this is what the character is like. But I don't do that. I just sit and write a book, and then I let the character emerge through that. It's so, writing is such an odd thing, because you can't tell someone how to do it or create it. You just know when you've done it. Like the first line of the Bone Ships is "Give me your hat," and it's when Lucky Mayus, who is this celebrated captain, meets Joron, who is a xenophobic drunk at the point you meet him, and it's just like bang. This is the way power works between them. She is in the position of strength, and him, although at the time he's officially what they call a captain, shipwife, what they call. She's just come in straight away, right at the beginning of the book, usurped him and taken over, and that sets you up. But it also creates questions for the reader about why is she saying that? Why is this hat important? And things like that. But as to how I sell a character to the reader, I have absolutely no idea. I just write it, and I write people that I'm interested in, and that's as far as my thought process goes. Is do I want to know more about this person? Not necessarily do I want to know this person, because generally I don't. They're not particularly nice, or they're quite dangerous. And like Lucky Mayus would get you in trouble. If you went out with her, you'd be in a fight by the end of the night because someone said the wrong thing. And that's not me. I'm a hide in the toilets type of person. But yeah, it's all done for me entirely on feel. This is this person, and do I like them? Do I want to know more about them? And then I write them. Quite often by the time I finish the book, I go back and I'm changing things at the start, because that's how I discover it. I think it's a different type of writer that can answer that question in a fulfilling manner for people listening. Not me. I can just I'll just write a book. It'll be all right.
That's a good way to do it, though. It's very authentic.
Yeah.
All right, Dave.
I think, obviously RJ makes a good point. I've got that on a laminated card somewhere. But I think good characterization springs from having, and maybe not even up front, but eventually it's a model of who the character is, who the person is in your head. So you know how they'll react in a given situation. You know what words they'd use to describe something, or what they'd say if they stubbed their toe, that kind of thing. And learning that about your character, again, maybe the character's fully formed in your head from the word go, or maybe it's just something that you work out as you go along, or perhaps you're working backwards and kind of creating them to fill a role in the plot. Like, I need someone to be an antagonist on that, or I need someone to represent this point of view, that kind of thing. In terms of how you illustrate that, you've got the sort of the standard introductory moments, and generally you've got like a page to get your descriptions in of a person, and after that you've got to be very careful about adding further details on the physical side, because you risk overwriting your reader's own impressions. So if you describe someone as they had hair or something, and then 3 years later, 3 pages later, 3 chapters later, you say and they tossed their beautiful bald head, or their golden hair, or whatever the hell, and in that time the reader's like, oh yes, I've pictured this person and they've got green hair and it's great, and then you're suddenly supplying this detail much later on, then you're going to create dissonance. So some writers are very into specifying physical details, precise descriptions. I know that there is a whole strand of writing devoted to essentially wardrobe design, and I'm always so impressed. It's something that you get reading the Master and Commander books with the Aubrey Mature and Patrick O'Brien ones, and you can get every single time a character enters in a scene, you get a description of what they're wearing down to the fabric and the color, and at no point does it feel like your time's being wasted. This is all sort of necessary detail to know that he was wearing a tan trouser and a long riding boot and so on, and these are characters you already know, but it's just sort of the additional layers of detail. Whereas if you're not going to go for that kind of thing, you at least need to give an impression of a character, inevitably, how big are they relative to other characters, or in presence, if not in stature, are they loud, are they quiet, that sort of thing. You've got the physical aspects, but the rest of it, the how are they, the who are they, and then the why are they, is the stuff that you're going to discover over the course of the book or the series, or indeed maybe never, if you're just going to keep hinting at it like some sort of suspense monster. So how do you give an impression of the character? I mean, you cannot summarize a human being in a sentence, but you can give the initial impression that you want. Who is this character to the reader when you meet them? What do you want them to feel ultimately about this character? Do you want to give the impression, oh, this person's a dick? Or do you want them to go, hang on, this person could be quite fun, or, something like that? Or who is this person? I want to know more.
I'm
Gosh,
using
meaningful answer.
You make a lot of really good points there. For instance, on the wardrobe thing, what somebody is wearing says so much about their personality. And I think, you can actually just kind of put little details like that in that speak for the character without even the character speaking. Another point that you make too is how much the reader puts themselves into the character and kind of comes up with their own conception. I think you're walking a thin line there between supplying just enough detail to get the character across, but then allowing the reader to actually supply their own details and become more invested in the character. And I think that's really interesting.
I like to keep it sketchy, but I mean, not just because I'm lazy, but also, there will be aspects of a character that are important, whether it is sort of this hair color is materially important, or the fact that they wear galoshes is going to be, very, very important later on, that kind of thing. But it's true also of secondary characters. I think a lot, we've really been talking about sort of primary characters, POV characters, protagonists up to this point, but secondary characters also, even if it's just the innkeeper that you encounter in chapter 3, you still want to give an impression of unless it is literally he bought 6 bags of chips from the innkeeper. It can be more than that. The innkeeper surveyed through his good eye and then scratched at the weird scar that went across his face, kind of thing. And you're like, well, what the hell's going on? But I mean, that's leading more into a world building question more than anything. Likewise, tied into the sort of the clothes that someone's wearing in a given scene. If we're talking fantasy, we're talking speculative fiction, or secondary world, or anything else, the kinds of clothes, the kinds of materials. If you want to really lean into that, then you can start talking about, well, like, not many people wear that kind of thing around here. And again, I know RJ hears that all the time, but in fantasy,
you can't get away with just saying about a character, yeah, they had a face. And my editor is constantly telling me that in her notes.
Yes. The person entered, they had a face and limbs.
Yeah.
Oh, another one.
Yeah,
I mean, if that's not great characterization, I've got nothing.
What if
to
they
say.
don't have limbs?
Wait a minute. Now we've got a twist.
Yeah.
But that's true in sense of the details that matter. You don't need to paint everything, but you can say, like, well, there's the one-armed man. Like, that fella's only got one arm. Where's the other arm? And why did he murder my wife? Sorry, it's Richard Kimball reference, inevitably. I'll shut up.
Okay, Mike, go. Your turn.
Me? Mike, Chen.
Yep, Chen.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I wasn't expecting this question. So like while RJ and Dave were talking, I was like, how did I do it? So I was thinking back to the opening, like the introductory chapters for all of my characters and my points of views. And I think one running theme that I do from like a craft perspective is I try to establish like what the reader's, like, I guess almost stereotype expectations would be like first, and then introduce elements within that space shortly after that are like completely contradictory. And that makes the reader start to think like, what is in that gap, like in between? So like, for example, my superhero and supervillain in We Could Be Heroes, I had talked with my editor like originally, because like it's a very grounded take on superheroes, and like their internal personas are nothing like their external personas. And so I wanted to lead with just the internal persona. And my editor was like, no, pull back, give us like half a page of stereotype superhero, supervillain tropes each, and then we can break it with, so it'll be really interesting to the reader. So Jamie, my supervillain, known as the Mind Robber for you classic Doctor Who fans, yes, it's named after the Mind Robber. So we meet him in chapter 1. He's robbing a bank, and he's like scowling and like twirling his hand and like saying ridiculous things. But then he breaks because he realizes that like he's British, but his American accent is not very good, and he realizes that he like pronounces something wrong. And then he throws his backpack down for like the bank teller to put money in there, and he's like, oh no, I left my library books in there and I've got to return them soon. So it's like little hints like that start to like chip away that like, wait a minute, there's something a little bit more rounded about this person, and anyone who's concerned about returning their library books on time has to be a good person. And so you get little bits about like his cat and like the things that he's going with, and then like an emergency happens in the bank, and then like he completely shifts because he's like, I don't want this person to get hurt, who's having like a medical incident. So it was about like establishing what he could be in theory of like the tropes of superhero villain, just enough to be like, okay, the reader gets that this is what he's supposed to be, but now let's go inside of him and realize that like he's worried about his library books.
That's really interesting. I love how you make that dichotomy kind of inside your characters, because that creates, fascination in your reader, an instant reason to turn the page.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
connection.
It's like the quirks that I think like, they really round up. It's like what Dave was saying about like, why does the innkeeper have like the scar on his face? And it could be like, because he took down an ogre, or it could be that like his cat was really pissy one day and just smashed him across the face. And so, those were the things that like you can establish like the trope that you want to play with, and then start to peel away the layers with it.
That's really cool. All right, Mike Carey.
Well, I guess I'd like to come back to something you said earlier about your favorite characters being anti-heroes. Because obviously what you're trying to get your reader to do is to emotionally identify with the character, well, with the important characters anyway. And that emotional identification is a very, very different thing from any kind of moral identification. You don't have to approve of what the characters do or what the characters are. You just have to find them interesting to be with.
Yeah.
You have to align your perspective with theirs. You can be just as engaged and sold on a Superman or a Walter White, a Richard III. And I think the most important way you do that, to give the reader the character's interiority, is through voice. And voice is always where I start with characters now. It wasn't always the case, but certainly for the last 10 years or so, when I'm trying to work out who a character is, I have conversations with them, or I write conversations between them and other characters. And sometimes, if they're the unique POV in a book, then you also need to work out the book's voice when the book is telling you what that character is thinking.
Yeah.
Because the book voice is part of the character's voice. So in Girl with All the Gifts, the main character is Melanie, who is a 12-year-old girl who is also, she's a sweet kid. She's very earnest, very intelligent, very curious, very sort of candid and upfront with her emotions. She's the sort of kid you'd love to have as your own daughter, except that she's also a zombie and she will eat you if she gets close enough to smell your flesh. And I wanted very much for the readers to sort of to buy her and engage with her as a child before they came to the realization that she was a monster. So the book was written in present tense. It was written in very short, declarative sentences. I was trying to get across the sort of the immediacy and freshness of a child's perspective, the way a child sees everything in the world as fascinating. When you're a kid,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. The smallest thing can just fill your mental horizon. Everything is sort of vivid and immediate. So I was trying to get there. That was the selling point for the character, and the character was the selling point for the book.
I think Mike has just said in a sensible way what I was trying to get at in my roundhouses way. That you kind of, you feel it, and that voice, that's the word.
And what I really like what he said is when he's talking about how the voice of the novel echoes the voice of the character. And I think that's really, I love that in books where the actual writing voice becomes the internal monologue of the character and lets you get so deep inside of a character's head. That's excellent. Okay, Sammy, take it away.
Thanks. I say thanks last. Oh,
Mike, go the other way next.
I am going to.
No, can't have it both ways. I was nodding along with what Mike Carey was saying. So when you were talking about the voice and sort of having empathy, there's a phrase that we use at work is the authentic human connection, and having that connection to a character that you're writing. So my book that's published, Anna, is first person. So the book is told entirely from Anna's point of view. And the very first chapter, the first few pages, she's attacked. So we are feeling, sensing, having all of those emotions that she's going through. So you're not actually learning much about Anna apart from the fact that physically she's being overwhelmed by a man. And as the book goes on, the layers of the character come out. So echoing Dave, RJ, what everyone is saying, for me personally, good writing is not reams and reams of she stood in front of a mirror and she had long dark hair and was incredibly thin and was wearing whatever. It's sprinkling your character through every single action that they're doing, their mindset, their thoughts, their internal monologue. Is there a reason why your character tenses up around a man? Anna tenses, her heart goes, she can't talk. Just feeding the reader facets of the character throughout the novel, and then letting them make their own decision as to what your character is. Good. I'd rather write a novel that makes people go, I really bloody hated this. She's a milk with toast victim, or oh my god, I loved it, I could empathize with this strong woman, than someone go, it was all right, I guess it was an okay book. Good characterization will pull your novel along, and it will stay with the reader, and I think for the right reasons. Either they'll really hate it and they'll hate your characters and they'll hate the message that you're getting across, or they'll love it and they'll be able to engage with it. yeah, that's my take on good characterization. Is don't be afraid to push those boundaries either. Don't write a character thinking, what do my readers want this character to be? You know, do they want this Mary Sue or this chosen one trope? You know, write a character that you want to write, that you feel fits your novel, and always write for yourself. Don't write a character for that elusive publishing contract. Write what you enjoy, and then that honesty and that love of your book comes out on the pages, and you write better characters for it.
I think you have an excellent point there. I think that the reader just really bonding with the character just is everything. You can, in fact, I can think of one of my absolute favorite novels, kind of just the world building's not there. The writing isn't really not there, but the character is just so fascinating that I love this novel. And it's everything. You can have the best world building, the best plot, the best wars that are just completely choreographed, and if your characters fall flat, nobody's going to care about any of that. And that's like a really good point.
I think one of the words that gets used, I don't know if anyone's used it yet, is compelling. Has anyone said compelling yet? Did anyone have that on their bingo card?
Not yet.
Yeah, yay, point to me. Compelling is the word, and I think it comes back to what you said, Melinda, about why do you love anti-heroes so much? And as Mike Carey said, it's about the mental connection, and Sammy as well. That connecting doesn't necessarily mean empathizing, and it doesn't necessarily mean agreeing with. And the characters, I was thinking outside literary fiction, book writing, whatever the hell you call this nonsense, TV. It's the Tony Soprano mold, isn't it? Of like, Tony Soprano is clearly a horrible person, and he does horrible things, and you can't stop watching him. And there's obviously all of those other characters that followed in his wake. And you think about how he's introduced in the program, and then the various things that happen. I mean, obviously, Sopranos is a masterclass of characterization in its own right, in terms of the cast of characters. How even in the course of a single episode, they will introduce somebody, show you who they appear to be, show you who they truly are, and then show you when they cannot have what they want because they are morally compromised by the very environment they've chosen to be in, or even not chosen to be in, and inevitably there'll be a tragic end. Great program, very uplifting. But what is it that makes it compelling? It is about that clicking sense of understanding the character enough to say, oh no, I know what they're going to do next. The realization. Yeah, RJ.
I did say that I don't know much about the characters from the start. That's a slight lie. Now I've had time to think about it. I'd love to say I came up with this by myself, but I didn't. Somebody told it to me, and it was a proper light bulb moment.
Tell us all.
Oh,
yes.
No, I'm keeping it secret. I'm just letting you know that I know. So I'm going now. That's me.
RJ's got the Coca-Cola recipe, and he will not live it up.
It was a friend of mine who writes for television. That's why Dave reminded me. And they said, when you're writing a character, the two things that are most useful to know is what they want, which is what they're going for in the book, and what they need. And if those two things are opposed to each other, you've got immediate tension in the character. And especially if you can put that across to your writer, like Girton in the Wounded Kingdom books, he thinks he wants to be a bit of a badass, when actually he needs a hug. And that just drives the entire trilogy. And every reader spends the entire trilogy going, don't do that, you dick. Because they can see it. They know what he should be doing. And that is what I start with characters. It's the same with Joron in the Bone Ships and the thing I'm writing now, that they think they want something, but actually they need something else more. And those two things are fighting each other. So that there's kind of constant tension, and then it's that slow roll of them getting to that realization that allows them to grow as a person. That sounded so grown up, didn't it?
It did. Actually, RJ, you just totally got into well, not the next question I was going to ask, but the one after that. You just skipped it to that, but that's perfect segue. Yeah, I do. I definitely want to talk about what characters need and what characters want, and what the difference is, and how you can actually really work that into it. I'm going to go ahead and go down to Mike Chen this time and start with you.
So character wants. So again, I will go back to Anakin Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker clearly wants the comfort of family and stability, and that's established in the Phantom Menace. And so that's basically just completely taken away from him for this power that he has. So he has this want for stability, and caring and empathy, and he has this need for control because his want was taken away from him at an early age, and he does not know how to handle that psychologically. So he's constantly fighting for control and to be allowed to feel his feelings. So you have these opposite forces that are pulling at him, and that's where the conflict comes in, because you can totally empathize with someone who lost basically his parent figures at a very young age and is told to stifle all his emotions. So that conflict is where all the interesting stuff happens, where even when he starts to do things that seem selfish, then you can be like, but I understand that, like he's trying to get what has been taken away from him. And then from a villain perspective or an external protagonist, when you have someone who is actively pushing those two pieces apart, like Palpatine does, that's where you can. It's like that. Oh no, don't do that, you dick, type of feeling that Dave and RJ were talking about. That's where like you have those external forces that are consistently pushing that apart, and then can the hero or the protagonist overcome that? And obviously in Anakin's case he couldn't, but like that's where the drama comes in, is like, can you overcome this, and do we want you to overcome this divide that keeps growing?
What's really funny to me is practically every like book you pick up on how to write uses Star Wars examples, simply because everybody is pretty familiar with it, so it's easy to go back to that example. I think it's just hilarious that you can just go right there. Like,
I thought about Anakin Skywalker a lot over the past few months. Those IP deadlines are insane. So
that's awesome. Okay, let's go to Sammy.
Oh, I thought we were going to go Mike Carey next, but God damn it.
Skipping around.
Wants and needs. It's a difficult. For me, it's quite a difficult one. I'm nodding away to what RJ was saying, having that aspect, but and I'll use my book as an example, is that Anna's a story of PTSD. So the wants and needs aspect are almost secondary, because I'm taking somebody through the cycle of PTSD of a sexual abuse victim. That's charming reading, very light reading, as you can imagine, lots of laughs in my book. But my main character, she wants to be left alone. She wants to be on her own. She wants to emotionally heal. She wants to deal with what's happened to her. And this isn't a spoiler because it's on the back cover. But she's pregnant, and so she needs to be somewhere where there is security, community. It takes a village to raise a child, all that analogy in this dystopian world. So she is struggling with coming to terms with what's happened to her and taking herself away and trying to reconcile with the abuse that she suffered, versus everybody wanting her, touch her baby, all these things that she doesn't want. There is obviously a major plot twist, which I can't talk about. Otherwise that would ruin the book.
You're breaking up a little bit for me. Is she breaking up for you guys too? Okay. Okay, Sammy, I think you're kind of like, your internet's like a little, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're still, the video's still a little fuzzy, but I can hear you better.
In a camper van.
Oh, that could do it.
Oh, thank you. That'll do it. So it is working out those character motivations and the needs and wants, and trying to get them across on the paper in a very authentic way, I think. I'll leave it there because my internet's rubbish.
I've never read your stuff before, but you just sold it to me. So that's really that's interesting. That's right up my alley.
galloping misandry is what one reviewer called it, and then strong feminist fable was another. So I think it depends on the viewer, the reader, and what you take from the book. And I think it again comes back down to, if you write these characters, you know, people go into novels with expectations of what they're going to read, and if you usurp their expectations, or you're doing something that feels very uncomfortable and perhaps is putting a mirror up to a few readers, they're not going to like where the novel's going, and they're not going to like the message that you're portraying, which has certainly been the case with Anna. And it's like I said, I don't want the meh book. I want the 1-star reviews, what's in this, versus 5-star reviews, this is how a trauma victim would behave. Thank you very much for writing an authentic novel. So I want readers to take something from my book, be it good or bad, because those 1-star reviews, they're always going to remember my book because they're going to hate it. But again, the people who love it are going to take something away from it.
That's awesome. All right, Dave, Wragg.
I wanted Mike Carey to go first so I could crib his answer. I mean, yeah, we've had some really good answers on this one already, and I mean, someone said to me once that they had a friend who worked in television, and they said you needed 2 things: what the character wants, what the character. Not going to get away with it. I think I probably lack a little bit of the mechanical process here, because in terms of at least of sort of primary characters, I will generally form them in my head as sort of as individuals, and then try and smash them together in the service of the story. And then quite often in the editing phase, I'll get questions like, what is it that this character actually wants? And I'm like, well, mostly they just want to be left the hell alone, which I think probably comes from me. But actually sitting and thinking about it is obviously extremely beneficial. But I quite enjoy the slightly more off the wall techniques of, you know, testing how well do I know my characters by sort of writing out just little, you know, what do they like, what do they not like, how would they behave at a wedding, that kind of thing. You know, just so of all the characters in the book, if they went to a wedding, would they sit there and make sarcastic comments as the bride came down? Would they get drunk and fall over the bar? Would they inevitably start a fight? That kind of, you know, it's not even a fantasy wedding. Just that sort of, can I sit there and can I instantly just go, yep, that's the one crying in the toilets at 10. That's the one who cops off with one of the groomsmen and, you know, isn't seen for the rest of the night. Like, yeah, I know who these characters are. And that's sort of the sense of, like, actually building them up as individuals, building them up as people analogs. And then in terms of sort of how do you then hit the emotional goals of that? Because that's really what it builds up. You know, how do you create sort of meaningful pathos and that sort of thing? Like, it's always about motivation, and it's always about demonstrating that motivation to the reader so they can get a sense of what's important to the character. Again, mostly the case for primary characters, so that then you can show why they should or should not get it, and then have them make the choice at the end, because inevitably it always comes down to a choice, isn't it? Are they going to choose to do what they need, or are they going to choose what they want and end up like Anakin Skywalker, who I believe ended up pretty well overall. I mean, he got promotion.
Why does he not have any limbs?
You know, I could do with some bionic limbs myself. So yeah, it seems like it all worked out just fine for Anakin.
Okay, Mike Carey.
I'm glad Dave went first, because yeah, keying off what you just said, it is always about motivation. And RJ talked about one major source of tension and therefore of plot momentum in terms of the conflict between what the character wants and what the character needs. You can create that tension in other ways. I think that's a great example, and it's a great template. Another template would be the gap between what the character wants / needs and the role that they're meant to play, the expectations that other characters place on them. Obvious example, Hamlet. You know, Hamlet is meant to avenge his father's murder, doesn't want to, wants to go back to college, just hang out with the boys a bit. But he can't. He has to enact the role. And then what drives the plot is the conflict between the perceived role and the character who is enacting it. You can just have a straightforward tension between what the protagonist and the antagonist want and need, and just throw them at each other. But it's important, I think, that if the story's not just going to resolve into a straight line, there needs to be the motivation and the things that you throw at the motivation, the obstacles that your characters have to face.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, when I'm thinking about the whole wants versus needs thing, you're right. That is kind of a typical kind of formula that I think a lot of people, kind of get thrown at. And I'm thinking about other things that could be like part of like the formulaic approach to like making characterization. And one of the things that really pops out in my brain, I don't know why it is Brandon Sanderson. He's done like a series of lectures, and one of them was on characterization. And he's got this sliding scale where he says a good character has to like have at least one of these things that are on the sliding scale. And it's likability, proactivity, and competence, which I thought that was really interesting. So like a person could be like extremely not likable, but if they're extremely competent, that can kind of like slide the scale so that the reader is more interested, and it could make a more compelling character, I guess.
Is
How do you?
there a scale for funny though?
Yeah, that's true.
I think that also makes a huge difference, because you can have some of the most evil and unpleasant characters, but they're funny. Like you want to see what they'll do next, because they'll be doing it with a bit of a smile.
This is very true. I think the one that comes to mind right there is Locke Lamora.
Yeah. Likeable, competent, funny, yeah. Which is something I aspire to, obviously.
That's very
true. I don't think I can agree with Brandon Sanderson if he used the word proactivity. I'm not having that. No.
So Colin McCarthy, when we were working on the movie Girl with All the Gifts, said to me at one point, it's useful as a writer to know the worst thing about your heroes and the best thing about your villains.
Mm.
And he said it doesn't have to come into the story at all. It's just a good key for you to get into their heads. And I've actually found that really useful on a lot of occasions.
Well, one suggestion I heard was, what's the worst thing you could say to this character?
Oh, that's a good one.
And that in terms, because you could really, like, if you wanted to cut them dead, if you wanted to crush their soul, what would you go for? And that, I think, is quite revealing in the sense of, pricking illusions or all the rest of it.
That's very true. Yeah. That's a good one. I'm gonna use that from now on.
There you go. That and how they behave at a wedding. Those are my tips.
There you go. I know what I do is I talk to them in the car as I'm driving. I'll be going down the road having conversations with my characters. I'm going to provoke them from now on with that. See how they respond.
Dave's wedding thing. One trick that I do from like just a craft perspective, because I'm kind of an outliner. Like I'm flexible, but like I try to have like a rough 3-act structure first. And when I don't know the characters, I will try to write like the midpoint and like the break into act 3 sections first. I may not keep it because I don't know the characters yet, but by putting them in like the most extreme circumstances, I find that their voices come to the surface faster. And then once I identify their voices, then I can think of like, well, what kind of quirks would seem natural for them. So it's not quite a wedding because it's more efficient than a wedding because you can use it later for your actual manuscript. But it's the same type of thing where it's like you put them in a high stakes, high emotion situation, and then you just kind of let them make decisions there, which sounds like kind of mentally ill, like let the characters make their decisions, but it really pushes them to become who they should be.
another great segue, because where I was going next was, when your characters become like such a human and such an individual to you, I mean, there's always the temptation to let them write the book, if that makes sense. There's always the question, does your plot go where your characters want to go, or do you steer the plot? So what do you do in that situation? You say you're an outliner, but you're flexible. So how much do you allow the characters to kind of write the book for you, if that makes sense?
I think because what I do is, like, first I outline, and then I have like a very skeletal draft, which is a lot of like discovery for the world and the characters, and then I just fill it in. But so I will adjust if it feels like this isn't right, like the character that I'm developing would not make this decision, and I will have to adapt. So it's flexible, like it can move back and forth. The main thing is, like, it's not necessarily deciding like, is the plot driving it or is the character just driving it. It's is there an internal logic and consistency between the decisions? Because when you break that, that's when I think you're really going to lose people. Like, I can count like the number of jump the shark moments with TV shows that I've watched, where like if it's like, later in the series, and like you can tell like the writers are trying to get to some sort of like concluding arc, but to do that they're forcing the characters to do things that are inconsistent with their internal logic, and that totally breaks it for me, and that's when I will drop off.
Have you heard the phrase "the idiot ball"?
No, I haven't heard that.
That's apparently a script writing term for TV, where they have to throw the idiot ball to someone for that week, and whoever catches the idiot ball is going to be the stupid person that creates the problems this week.
I can think of number of series that I've stopped watching because that happened, and it's like they're too competent. They're too competent. They're too smart. They're too cool to do that, and that totally breaks it for me.
Yeah. I think that one of the grand examples of this was the last season of Game of Thrones.
Yes. Yep.
I think that's one where everybody goes to.
I'm pretty sure it stopped after the 4th series, didn't it? I don't remember anything after that. I do hit my head a lot.
There's a really, I don't know if anyone saw the US version of the crime drama The Killing.
No.
The first 2 series are brilliant. They're these 2 screwed up detectives who are forced together and learn to be friends, and it's brilliant. And then in season 3, right at the end, they fall in love, and it's the most angry I've ever been with television in my entire life. You just think, I can't even speak about it. But
I don't remember that happening either. I mean, the first two series were like the original Danish series split in half, right? It finished on a sort of cliffhanger.
Yeah.
What was the second one? Was that the one on the docks?
I can't remember. I've wiped it from my mind.
Clearly it made a massive impression, but I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, at the end he walks away and leaves, and then clearly somebody said, that's not very upbeat.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he's there, and it's just like, I always loved it.
If there's one thing that we want from this sort of incredibly grim crime drama, it's a really upbeat ending.
For me, the very worst example of characters failing is the film with Gerard Butler and Jamie Foxx, Law Abiding Citizen, when right at the end, this person who has managed to evade the FBI, the most intelligent crime analysts and all sorts, gets caught just as he's about to sort of detonate his plan, when he's planned to get himself into prison for years, to get arrested, to kill particular people, to work all the way in the mastermind up, and then right at the end, he then does like a 180 on his character arc and makes such a stupid mistake that this man who's been driven for revenge for 15 years just wouldn't have done, but it was to give that happy feel-good ending that the good guy wins, when actually, such is life, sometimes the bad guys do win, and it would have been a much better film if the bad guy had won, because that's what we were led all the way for nearly 2 hours of this film, that this guy was going to win, and then he drops the ball or gets the idiot ball, and it all
thanks.
And that's such a betrayal to the readers. Yeah. I mean, when you make them promises about what this character is going to do, what this character is like, and then you just completely reverse it, the reader does feel a sense of betrayal, and that's when the 1 stars start really pouring in. think.
I think, I mean, Mike Chen raised a really good point about like when you end up in this situation when you're an outliner. I am an outliner. Hi, Mike. Yeah, my name's Dave. And inevitably, that sort of when do you have to be flexible? When do you have to deviate from the outline? It's when you've screwed up the outline. Is the answer? Is when you've written so this needs to happen, then this needs to happen, then this needs to happen, and you get to that middle part, and you're like, there's no reason for them to do this. It's not like, well, the character wouldn't do that. It's not even that close. Like there is no reason for anyone to end up in this place making this decision. So that's when you have to sort of take a step back and reevaluate. Like it's not necessarily a characterization. It could be just simply, we need more information. We need to change the plot. We need external pressure. We need this, that, or the other. But because if you want them to end up in this particular place for this particular showdown, and the character's like, no, that's a stupid idea. We're not doing that. You've got a problem.
Yeah, I mean, speaking as another outliner, I think it doesn't matter how good the outline is. I used to do like 18 to 20,000 word synopses, chapter breakdowns before I started, because I was terrified of ad-libbing it. But inevitably, however well you think you know the characters, they only really start to come to life for you as you write them. So they're inevitably going to develop in ways that are surprising to you as you start to inhabit their minds a bit. I was on a panel at London Con one time where another writer was saying, my characters are constantly rebelling against me. I try to make them do this and they go off in their own direction. It's I can't control them. My characters control me, which is a sort of humble brag. It's like saying, the contents of my mind are so vivid that my characters are more real than most of the people I know. But there is a truth, I think, in the fact that it's a fractal process. Your characters become more real as you live with them, and you learn to understand them better as you live with them.
I've only ever had one occasion where a character did something unexpected. That was just in a little sort of sci-fi-esque short story where they put a character on a train and then was just trying to fill the train with a bit of detail. So I put some sort of loudmouth on his phone, just, doing the whole buy, sell, Bitcoin, etc. This predates Bitcoin, but still. And I realized that there was no way that the protagonist was just going to sit there with this fella jabbering on. So despite the fact the outline is like maintain a low profile until blah, inevitably character ended up punching guy in the face and then hiding the unconscious corpse because like you have a character who reacts a certain way to a certain situation. That's an external stimulus. They have a response. So I mean, technically I should just have seen that coming in the outline. It's my own fault.
I don't have characters that get to take over because my opinion is that they're my soldiers and their job is to die where I tell them. That's how I approach it. But sometimes
put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah. When I'm writing it, it's a very immersive process for me. Like I'll write and suddenly it's like 2 hours later, and I'm lost in it. But sometimes I'll write something that suggests more interesting possibilities than where I thought I was going. I'm usually thinking 3 or 4 chapters ahead because I don't outline. And that happened in the second Wounded Kingdom book. There was a character I thought, oh, you're going to die. You've served your purpose. You're just cluttering things up now. And when I wrote the chapter that originally would have killed them, it actually suggested a more interesting line that I could take. And I'm really glad I didn't give the book much better. But they're not controlling me. They do as they're told. Get in your place, in your bed, character. Get in your corner.
Well, we're kind of getting on in time here, so I thought I would just kind of open it up to any questions that anyone has at this point for any of our authors here on the panel.
I'd like to ask RJ where he gets his ideas.
That's a good question.
I get them from Dave.
This constant flurry of no way, no one's going to believe this.
People talk about that being a bad question, and I don't think it is. I just think it's the hardest question that you can ever be asked because
you don't want to give an honest answer, do you?
And it's massive. It's everything. We'll get your ideas from everything. It never stops.
I mean, where do you get your characters? Is possibly a more
on brand
related one.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy watching reality TV and then just imagining what the people I see who are normal, real people on television, imagining what they might be like if you put them into a fantasy world and gave them a sword, or
Yeah.
in my case, didn't give them a sword and let them work it out.
Yeah, most of your characters are people you know, inevitably, aren't they? You in that sense, you do write what you know.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Most of the characters of my book about like freelance mercenaries who are continually screwing up and bickering and generally falling short of their goals and never had enough money and never got a decent job was not at all based on my professional career.
Here's a question or a comment. And how has RJ managed to stay so on topic for so long? Who has magic? How did you achieve this?
I'm just tired.
You have to take him for a run around after lunch, and that helps use up some energy, and then he'll sleep in his basket for a bit, and then he can put him on a panel.
It's because I'm doing edits. I'm doing edits for my next book, so I'm half dead.
That'll do it.
I've accidentally written a 190,000 word book, and I'm furious with myself about it.
Don't do that,
That's
RJ.
a lot to edit.
No.
It's so much work.
Swear to God, 70,000 books, 70,000 word books from now on.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I'm going to do.
God, I wish I could. Yeah, I swore when I started it as well. It's short book.
Okay, well, I think at this time what I'm going to do is just ask you guys to kind of go around the panel and say, what are you guys like working on and what do you got coming up? So obviously, RJ, you're doing edits. Let's hear about it a little bit more.
I'm doing edits for my next fantasy trilogy, which we don't have a title for it, and we think it's called the Forsaken Trilogy. We don't have a title for separate books, and it's kind of very loosely Robin Hood, but it's not Robin Hood. And there are octopuses and squid that live on land and can fly, and yeah, it's very difficult to describe it. It's kind of, I'm playing with the idea of the farm boy who's the chosen one.
Okay.
Yeah, and then totally screwing about with that and what could happen. And it's people much later on in their lives. It's different to what I did before, but because I want to. It's very different to the Bond ships. And it's very different to the Wounded Kingdom because I always want to do something new to me.
Okay. There's a comic calamari contest. Could be a good title. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's based around forests. I've done sea and I've done like big moorlands of the Wounded Kingdom. So the forests this time. It's very tree based fantasy. That's what 2022.
With squid.
Squid and trees. That's what's coming.
Squid and trees.
I was writing trees before they were cool.
True. Very hungry trees.
Very hungry. So what are you writing now, Mike Carey?
I just finished writing a book called I Will Tell You 7, which is it's about a medieval village which is threatened by the local landowner, and they decide to recruit a handful of champions to save them. It's basically the Magnificent Seven if the Magnificent Seven were undead.
Wow, that's really cool. I like that.
And now I'm writing about dimension traveling rabbits.
Can they talk?
Yes. Yeah.
I love Talking Rabbit. That's my favourite character, Hazel from Watership Down.
Yeah.
I knew I'd come back to it eventually.
We could go on with that about how an animal can be such a compelling character, but I think we're running out of time. Okay, Sammy, what are you writing now?
So I'm writing a book called Emma, which is a standalone in the same world as Anna. But it's a story of revenge, human trafficking, drugs, county lines, murder, and a bit of a whodunit. So it's not quite the PTSD journey of my first novel, but it's still covering some stuff that I know from my working life. But I did pitch this morning an idea that I've had to my friends, which was, I wonder if there's a bit of a market for a full-time police detective mother of two who becomes a vigilante at night and then ends up having to investigate her own crimes And the consensus was, do it, write it. So I've got some ideas that I'll be plotting out for that, I think, and probably coming to RJ now and asking him for his advice and sort of taking it from there with this one. But yeah, so a bit of two very different ideas that I'm working on at the moment.
Sounds like really fascinating. Yeah, I'm gonna have to start picking up your stuff. I like
Sounds
that. I like that.
So upbeat. Very cheerful.
As you can tell, I like really cheerful things with my anti-heroes and everything. So, all right, Dave Wragg.
Yeah. So I've just sent the first book of a new trilogy to my editor, which is essentially large land squids that live in a forest with the Magnificent Seven as zombies. Annoyingly, there is an element of I'm doing the Seven Samurai thing, but that's for the next book. And they won't be zombies, so no one will ever connect the two, and that'll be fine.
Sure.
The first one's more of a sort of mashup of Terminator 2 and Fury Road, but told in a sort of Persian Western setting. Yeah, I mean, it's as derivative as it sounds. So we'll just have to see what the editor says on that. None of this is announced yet, but eventually it will be maybe published next year for the first book, and then some more after that.
Very cool.
Exclusive.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have told you that. You won't tell anyone else, right?
No. They're sealed.
Thanks, guys.
And Mike Chen, I think we've heard a little bit about like what you're doing next. Why don't you just kind of plug what you just like put out? You know, plug your new release.
My publicist will be really pissed off for me like not talking about my new release at all. So Light Years from Home is kind of like the X-Files if you took Mulder and Scully away and just focused on the family fallout of what happened. So it's about a family where 15 years ago, one of the siblings is abducted by aliens, and that fractures the family and forces the siblings to kind of go in their own directions and how they process this. And then 15 years later, the brother comes back and he claims he's been fighting like a Mass Effect style war the whole time. And so the sisters have to decide, like, is he telling the truth? Is he completely just bullshitting? Is he mentally ill? And a lot of family feelings in there. I'd say it's 90% family drama, 10% space opera, but the space opera drives the family drama in there. So that just came out this week, and it's gotten starred reviews, even from Kirkus, who hates everything. So I think it's good. And then obviously Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi are coming in Star Wars Brotherhood on May 10th, which is like the best thing that has ever happened to me. It's awesome.
Awesome.
And then next January, I have my very wholesome vampire book called Vampire Weekend, about a vampire named Louise who got turned at an Iggy Pop show and spends her entire immortality playing in bands and going to concerts. But at some point, she has to reconcile like the generational trauma of growing up with how she did and reconciling with her family.
Wow. Oh my God. All right.
Amazing.
Another book that's just been sold to me.
A lot of character stuff.
You had me at Iggy Pop. Okay, so I think at this point what we'll do is we'll just like, go around again one last time and say, how can readers, follow you, find you, your social media, websites, whatever you got on your market site, go.
Wait.
Oh,
Melinda, you need to sell us your books.
Yeah.
My books.
What you're
My
doing.
books are. Oh, okay. Well, right now I'm writing the sequel to other one, Dragon Mage, which is it's a big book. It's like, well, Dragon Mage was like 800 pages, so this one's got to be unfortunately I set a precedent. So yeah, I'm like bogged down in the middle of that right now. So that's really what I'm doing. Yeah, that's about it. So, Dragon Mage is about a child who's on the autism spectrum, who is like extremely focused on knots, and like that's his thing. And it turns out that knots is actually the magic system of the world, and he's very, very gifted at it. So, and he becomes a dragon rider. So that's what my book's about.
Cool.
So, okay. And I guess I'll just leave it off then. You can find me on Facebook, ML Spencer Author, Twitter, same thing. I've got my own website, ML Spencer Fiction, so that's how you can like find me. Okay, Sammy, you go.
The same. So Sammy HK Smith. You'll find me on pretty much all the social medias under that tag. No dots, just all one word. And yeah, I've got my own website, and I love connecting with people. So just add me and have a chat, and yeah, it'll be great.
Thank you. And Mike Carey.
I'm on Twitter as Michael Carey191. I don't do much else in the way of social media. I try to avoid Facebook these days. So yeah, it's that or nothing.
Thank you. And Mike Chen.
So I am Mike Chen Writer on Twitter and Instagram. It's important to put the writer in there because there's a lot of people named Mike Chen in the world, including the really famous YouTube food guy who's got like 3 million followers. So
Oh my God,
like,
yeah.
we've gotten our fan mail like stuff before. So Mike Chen Writer. I am on Instagram with that, but it's mostly pictures of my dogs and like hikes that I take with my daughter, so it's not very interesting unless you like dogs.
Okay, Dave Wragg.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dave Wragg. I have daveragg.com with a silent W, as you can see from the thing, and I am It's Dave Wragg on Twitter, where I pop in occasionally and then sort of shake my head with a weary sense of disbelief and then vow never to come back. So yeah, every couple of weeks.
That's mostly what it's for, I think.
Yeah.
And RJ. Oops, I'm sorry. Go
Well,
ahead.
let's just say if you tag me in anything, I will still pop up and say hello, though. So, like a little sad Jack in a box.
I'm sure it's not a sad Jack in the Box. I'm sure it's a happy, bubbly one, like your characters are so funny.
How dare you?
Okay, RJ.
You can find my website, which is rjbarker.co.uk, and mostly I'm on Twitter, and I've got the stupidest @ that was a mistake because I didn't think I'd ever actually become a writer. So if you search for RJ Barker, you'll find me, and I'm always on Twitter, just nonsense all day. And I will reply to @ I like to talk to.
That's how you can tell you're a proper writer.
Yeah. Descriptive language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to thank you all for coming. It has been so
Thank
much
you.
fun. I have learned so much stuff, and you guys are amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Belinda.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you, Belinda. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.